Okay, so it's time for us to go ahead and get back into our coverage over the Heroes Reborn reality. And we do pick up with good old Steve Rogers once again with Captain America issue number 7. Now, the only reason why I'm covering one issue because the next storyline for Steve Rogers kind of leads into the end of Heroes Reborn for his series, but also the entire reality as well. But anyways, when it came to issue number 7, it was really more of Marvel trying to reestablish the supposed origin for Steve Rogers in this reality. And guys, by this point in the whole storyline, when it came to Rob Liefeld, he left the book. Technically, Marvel kind of pushed him off the book because the sales were pretty low around that time. And so you had a guy known as James Robinson come in. Now, when it came to James, his first storyline was really more of him just trying to, give us the rundown on the origin of Steve Rogers in his reality, but also kind of add a tad bit more information to it. And so as we get into the opening pages of the storyline, we do pick up with Nick Fury with Contessa Valentina as well, and they're having a meeting with good old, Bill Clinton. Here's the thing, because with Bill Clinton, around this time with him being president, he felt like he should know everything about Steve Rogers, because to him, Steve Rogers is a war hero. He's Captain America. Now, you have Nick try his best to tell Bill, listen, you don't want to know everything about good old Steve. But it's Bill saying no, I should know because one, I am the president, but two, I've been a fan of the guy for many years. Now, you have Nick tell Bill that there were other presidents before him who never truly learned about the actual origin of Steve Rogers. The only person who did know was Nixon. Now, the thing was, they kind of used Nixon to kind of begin the process of hiding the true origin of Steve Rogers. And let me explain. Because for Bill Clinton, what he believes that he knows about Steve Rogers is technically wrong. You see, for Bill, he believed that Steve came from Iowa, that Steve was some farm boy, but then out of nowhere, he got the call to go fight in World War II, and then became Captain America and became a war hero, this great figure for people to look up to. But you didn't have Contessa and also Nick say okay, so you are completely wrong. That is not even close to his actual origin. Because even though this is an alternate reality, technically, when it comes to Steve Rogers, his origin is still very similar to his main Marvel Universe counterpart, where, yes, he did answer the call to go out there and fight in the war, but he also was part of an experiment. Of course, the idea that there were other people that were given the super soldier serum, but unfortunately, it didn't work on them. But in some kind of way, it did work for Steve Rogers. So, of course, he became Captain America, going out there and fighting against the Red Skull, like we always know. Now, for Bill Clinton, he kind of gets the idea that he did not know the beginning, but he did know the middle part. Okay, I had no idea that technically he was part of some kind of experiment, but at least I figured that he was this war hero who fought against characters like the Red Skull or Valkyrie and also a bunch of Nazis out there as well. But you didn't have Bill say, okay, there have been so many different stories of what happened to Steve after the war. For example, he believed that Steve was frozen in ice. There was also the idea of a time machine. There was also the idea that he almost had died, so he went away so the world would not know that he was dying. There were so many different stories that Bill and the public had heard about what happened to Steve after the war. But you didn't have Nick say, none of that is true. And guys, I forget, we covered the first storyline for Steve Rogers in this reality, and we have learned what they did to him. You see, when it came to Rob Liefeld in the first issue of Captain America, he kind of told us that after the war was officially ended, Steve and Nixon got into an argument. You see, for Nixon, he wanted Steve to stand by his side as he told the American public, hey, listen, so we had just dropped the atomic bomb on Japan. Now for Steve, he was not okay with that. And the reason why, because innocent people were killed off. Yes, Japan was their enemy, but it was the government. It was the military. not the people of Japan. And so for Steve, he was kind of upset by that. And he said, you know what? I cannot stand by your side as you tell the American public what you did. And so Steve stormed out of the office. And so when it came to Nixon, he told Nick, like, we got to make sure that man right there is under our control, because if we have an angry, Steve Rogers, an angry Captain America out in the public, it'll make us look bad. And so you had Nick control the mind of Steve Rogers. Now, we were told that when it came to Nick, he got the idea from the Nazis, from the Red Skull. That's not the case anymore in this issue. Because Nick's saying, like, okay, you had the OSS, and the OSS was like the predecessor to the CIA. And when it came to the OSS, they had so many different people that was so covert, they had no place to go. And so that created S.H.I.E.L.D. You had a CIA, but you also have S.H.I.E.L.D. And S.H.I.E.L.D. is more advanced, but also they work a whole lot better behind the scenes, better than the CIA does. And so when it came to S.H.I.E.L.D., they had different types of technology that was so advanced. Of course, they had ways to control the mind of Steve Rogers. Now, we had learned the first issue that when it came to Steve in the 90s, he believed that he had a family, a wife, a child. But what about the prior years? What about the years after World War II? And so it's Nick telling us a few moments in time they tried to control Steve in different types of ways. And so what we had learned that, yes, they kept him on ice technically, but they were released Steve out in different points in time to use him in different American conflicts. But here's the thing, his mind was messed with. And so for Steve Rogers, he would fight in the Korean War. He would fight in the Vietnam War, but he would have different names in those wars. Like, for example, John Battle or Jack Strike. The problem was that he would have these episodes when it came to being the American hero in those wars. And so for Nick and S.H.I.E.L.D., they kind of realized, like, hey, you know what? Maybe, just maybe, we should keep him on ice. And that led into the 1990s, where they finally let him go. But of course, they gave him a family, a different type of life. And he was doing good for a while. But the problem was that all his old enemies are popping up left and right. Baron Zemo, the Red Skull. You also have the Avengers needing his help. You also have AIM popping up left and right. And so over time for Steve, he had no choice but to remember who he was. He had no choice to go ahead and get back into that role as Captain America. Now, while you had Nick, Contessa, and also Bill having this conversation, Steve Rogers was outside listening in the entire time. And so this kind of leads into the ending of this issue, where we do see Steve Rogers walking in, right? He's kind of like, hey, listen, so I am disgusted by what the government did to me. I am disgusted by what S.H.I.E.L.D. did to me. And so it's him kind of saying, like, I'm no longer going to be under S.H.I.E.L.D.'s protection, but I'm also no longer going to be used by the government either. I'm going to basically travel across the country to rediscover my love for this country, for America, and the ways I felt in love with when it came to the American way. But it's Steve tearing off the old symbol, which is going to lead to him wearing a different symbol, a big A symbol instead. But with that being said, this is the actual ending of this book, because you do have Bill kind of like, hey, listen, man, I had nothing to do with what happened to you in the past, but I agree. Go out there and have the chance to rediscover the country and fall back in love with it. Now, at first, you have Nick being somewhat upset, but you didn't have Nick say, you know what? That's right. We did do you dirty. We basically did control your entire life almost. You know what? You have the right to finally be, well, free. And so this is where we're going to end today's comic book video. So please leave me a like down below and subscribe. But guys, see y'all next time. Later.